anyhow, I was thinking about that story when you were tearing down the courthouse.
Miles City, Montana.
Right. And the fact that you found this box of old documents in the wall.
Yeah.
Behind the wall.
Remember how they came out?
Well, when you shoved the wall down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it worth telling about that? Or?
Well, yeah, we could. There's no reason we couldn't skip forward to that and just.
Why don't we just tell about it now?
Tell the story, exactly.
I'll tell the story then. All right. Well, hello, microphone. Where are you? It's in here somewhere. Anyway, I believe you.
On the red light.
Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah, Roland was remembering a case of me tearing down a courthouse with another guy, or part of one. Where I was living in Miles City, Montana then. And I guess must have been 19. And I worked for this construction company. It was kind of an interesting construction company, small. Larson Construction Company. And whenever I'd go home from college for spring or Christmas or whatever it was, the phone would ring and the owner would call up and say to my parents, "Is Sherwood home from college?" And they'd say, "Yeah." I'd say, "Well, can he work?" And so I'd go to work for this construction company. Well, one summer, I like demolition better than construction anyway. I always thought that'd be good. I'd like to have been in demolition, but our job was to tear down the Custer County Courthouse in Miles City, Montana. I went back in the 1800s, and big old brick building, doing pretty well on it, but there was a 3 or 4 story tower in front of the thing. And so there was another college kid and me, and the foreman says, "Okay, you guys knock down that wall." Or they'd knock down most of the back wall, and all the back wall, most of the side walls, but the front wall was still up there with some of the sides on it. So, okay, so we went and got a big old mechanical jack and a great big beam. We braced the beam way up on the wall. And that's all we had was a jack and this long, heavy beam. We started jacking on that mechanical jack until the walls started to go. And it went down, and the wind blew, and the dust flew, and it slammed onto the ground, and cardboard boxes flew all over the place. And I think, what the heck's in those cardboard boxes? So I ran out and I picked one up, and I looked inside, and it was courthouse records way back in, I guess, the middle 1800s. And it seems that Miles City must have been a kind of a wild and unlawful kind of a cattle town. I think maybe the cattle drives must have come up there. And I took the box home, and I pulled out one of the files, and it was, I can't memorize the words, but it's something to the effect, well, some guy with scratchy writing, and I guess they might have been past quill pens and into dip point pens by then that probably couldn't spell or anything else. Taking down the court records, right out, it was just the records of whatever happened in court. And to the effect of, okay, so Jim Slade come out of the Miles City Saloon to swing a door. You seen Jack Spence out there. "Jack, you son of a bitch, I'm going to kill you right now." He takes out his gun and shot him. These guys, these are the witnesses all along the boardwalk that seen what happened. And, there was just all kind of stuff like that, plus little mundane court reports and stuff like that. Man, I got a treasure here, So I stuck it at home and went back to college at the end of the summer. But my dad got called back into by then the Air Force because of the Berlin airlift. And so my parents moved again, and they always threw out everything. But as Barbara said to me, I said, that would have been a PhD. She said, PhD, heck, that would have been a book. But back then, there weren't these little historical societies all over the place, and really nobody cared. Tremendous loss because there was a part of the history of Montana that nobody knows anymore. And that's what it was. Go ahead and talk about it anyway.
One time we were talking about...
Wait!
Yeah, nowadays people are breaking out records like that, and I've read some books like that. I mean, there's the book of, like, say, women's diaries, where they're going across the country. That's an example of that.
Yeah, and those were very revealing that they dug out those women's books and found out what that was really like.
Yeah,
And sometimes the reality is just greater than the myth. It is.
yeah, and it can even be more interesting. And I'm trying to think. I know I read another book recently that was where a guy had gone back into exactly those kind of records. And
Was it about Montana?
no,
There is a Montana book that goes into that sort of thing. It was a vigilante thing. And some guy tells the reconstructed true story of that. I got to look it up from the library. It's got a weird title to it, something like Thieves, Scoundrels, and Sons of Bitches, or something like that. But they were.
Hear about that
I mean,
book,
they
yeah.
really were.
Exactly
They were the
that.
meanest, unprincipled guy that would kill you for $5, and they were just preying on everybody they could till the vigilantes finally took them out.
Yeah. But, I mean, yeah. No, I guess I think of that story and I just think, gosh, you have to be. Well, there's a lot of different lessons there. How to recognize opportunities when they come along.
Yeah.
How to determine what to save or what not to save. Be careful, I guess.
Well, the thing is, there were many things like that people had back then. But my family was always on the move.
Yeah.
Always on the move, and there was never, ever anything kept. But it did save the problem of dividing up the property at the end.
There was none. Yeah. Well, of course, now people have gone just about overboard the other way, and any little trinket they try and keep, regardless of how silly it might be.
Yeah.
But, well, and I hope, if you're up to age 16, I assume you've gotten to the story about how you received your driver's license.
I never thought about the 16-year-old drive. 15.
Yeah, I thought it was, earlier than
15.
16.
Well, in Montana, driver's license didn't matter to begin with. You're driving farm trucks when you're 10 years old, or cars, or whatever. You get, a kid goes to 7th grade, he's got to get out of the farm, he's got a car. Besides, who was going to check? I mean, was there a cop somewhere? And parking. I mean, when I was 12 years old, the idea of parking a car, you go where you go and turn off the ignition, get out, And so when I came to Seattle and discovered about parallel parking years later, somebody had to show me how to do it.
Huh.
I mean, it wasn't that hard once you knew how to drive a car, but in Montana, you just get out. In fact, it was kind of funny when I went back there in '69 and found myself doing it again. One time I just parked in the middle of the road and got out and talked to somebody for a while. We went in somewhere, and after a while I came back out and got the car.
Huh.
That was in Hobson. I went back to revisit Hobson.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
And Hobson was smaller than ever.
Now, this was in, you said 69?
So I think it must have been 60. Oh, did I say 69? Boy, am I a liar. 96.
96. Oh, you just
1990.
transposed him.
After I quit from the ferry service. And
Oh,
summer I
that
had-
trip. I thought maybe the trip you
No.
went back there with Roger.
No,
Oh,
that was just a flying trip into Valier. Yeah, you fly through the pass and you get the little airplane high enough and look down and just believe it.
Now, did you, I assume, told the story of the 410?
Yeah, I got the 410
got
in
the
there. It was
410.
up on my grandfather's dresser.
And you just go walking out and just shooting it or hunting rattlesnakes? or
Well,
rabbits?
whatever, I mean, actually not right there in Chinook. That wasn't a good place for that, but yeah, you can have it. There was nothing more to it than that. My grandfather and my grandmother were not demonstrative about their grandchildren, and he just simply didn't care about the gun. That was all. It wasn't like he was giving it away like this wondrous thing that he thought he'd do for his grandson.
So they were both there in Chinook at the time.
Yeah, they seemed old at the time, but I suppose they must have been in their 60s. But, old house that smelled like stale tobacco smoke.
Oh, they smoked. Cigarettes?
Oh yeah, it was cigarette smoke. It just smelled like stale. My grandmother hated my grandfather anyway, and I think he hated her too.
Huh.
And I don't think they cared much about us kids. But my parents, my mother was important to them, and their son, Edgar Lee, was important to them. They'd both been really exemplary young people in that town, outstanding. And the kids were Ed and Dorothy, my mother, were both people still spoke incredibly highly of them. Super smart. My Uncle Ed was the first Eagle Scout in the state of Montana. They really were exemplary people, and my grandparents were very highly respected in the town.
And now he was the tailor then? Is that the guy? That
Yeah, he was a tailor, and even when I knew him in the 30s and early 40s, he still cut suits out of cloth. And people would come in, they'd be measured, and out of all his vast array of all his wool samples, they'd pick a sample of what they wanted the suit out of. But he was already then into taking the measurements and sending the measurements someplace to have the suit done, and he'd adjust it when he came. My grandmother was the seamstress, and there must have been a heck of a lot of seamstress work in every suit that he ever cut out, too. But that's what they did. But, of course, they had what they call Lee's Toggery. And in those Montana towns, even now, you see the old brick buildings, those signs going way back into the 20s and before. You've seen them up on
Oh, yeah. Still in
it
some.
still says Lee's Toggery.
Yeah.
And he sold Stetson hats and all that stuff.
Oh, it still says that now to this day, as far as you
Well,
know?
the old sign up on the side, where they painted it on the side of the brick in black and white.
Still there, huh?
Well, I haven't, the last couple of years, it was there for many, many years.
Wow.
I guess you drove through Shinnecock this one time. I went you on that trip.
Oh, I'm sure it was. I just.
And it was still there then, but you couldn't see it because we went through in the night, but it was still there.
Yeah, I wouldn't have probably remembered anyhow. I should make a trip back there. Take a look and see if it is still
Even
there.
Chinook, it's gotten smaller and smaller. But it was a thriving town until they started putting fast roads through and getting cars after World War II. Everybody went 20 miles down the road to Havre to buy everything. So now you can was the various explosions that they used to have in Sunburst in the vicinity. Well, like the time myself and Mac McNally. Can I tell about that now?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, we on?
Turn it back on.
In Sunburst, Montana, that was I told the Sunburst story and moved on. But yeah, I was back in Sunburst in 7th and 8th grade. So one time, Mac and I were supposed to go down and clean the church basement, so we went down and did the janitor work. We were in the kitchen, and they'd have big church dinners in various churches back then. A great, big, huge, commercial style iron cooking range with a grill on top or whatever you want, mini burners and big, heavy thing. But everything in Sunburst was gas because we lived in the oil well. You get to looking at the thing, and there's all these burners on it, and there's kind of brass-looking buttons all across the front you push. And so push a button, so we got a long flame it'll lick out as a pilot light. It would go to a certain burner. So we turn on a thing and see which one would do, and we start lighting all the burners. And there was, doggone it, there was one valve there. We turned the thing on, we pushed all the pilot lights. And nothing lit it.
Uh-huh.
And it kept, we got to get it eventually, Next thing you know, Mac and I are both sitting about 5 feet away on the floor with our backs against the wall, holding a great big cast iron oven door. And we think, oh boy, first thing is coming first thing you just kind of stunned, you know. We were sitting there, oh my God, we've broken the cast iron hinges and they're going to catch us now. But luck would have it, we stood up with the darn thing, and all you had to do was set it back in the free hinges, close the door, turn off the burner, and then looked at ourselves, and our eyebrows were nearly singed off, and we had holes in our wool sweaters. That was pretty much it.
Like a cartoon or something.
Yeah, I mean, it was like cartoon. And the other thing is the story about a friend, you know, and another one is not a story, too. But I mean, this happened, but I just didn't happen to be there. Many years later. A guy lived in town down in Shelby, and they shared a ride to work, and the guy said one day, he says, hey, the guy who drives, you guys want to see something you've never seen before? I said, sure. And, well, you know this story. Anyway,
I know this story.
Well, what he had was a brand new remote control garage door opener, and that was a really new thing. He went over to his garage to demonstrate. But what you got to know is that it's so bloody cold there, and the gas was so cheap that everybody had a gas stove in there. In the garage, just let it burn all night, so when you start in the morning, your car would go. They wouldn't even bother to insulate them most of the time. Just let the stove burn away in there. It was so cheap. Anyway, your car would be relatively warm in the morning. Anyway, he pulls up in front of his garage, and then he pulls out this magical little box. He's going to open the remote door, and he points the thing at the garage and pushes the button, and the garage blows to a bunch of little pieces of kindling. The other typical one in Sunburst was a house about a block from ours. People went away for a few weeks in the wintertime, left the gas on, and the house blew up. It didn't hurt it, except it blew out all the windows. But the funny thing that happened was they had a hardwood floor upstairs. And it must have just domed it up a little bit when the explosion went off downstairs. People came home, went upstairs, and the hardwood floor was in perfect shape, except it was covered with all the nails that used to hold it down.
That is incredible.
Yeah, it was just sprayed with nails all over the floor. Lifted them up, threw them out, and settled back down in his old place.
Wow.
So that was the nature of living in the oil fields where gas was cheap and somewhat unregulated.
Yeah, people didn't.
You know, Tigger the dog one time in the winter time. Well, this was later, I think, when we might have moved to Valier by then. I don't know where we were. Yeah. Or you could see forever to the mountains. Way below zero this one time. The dog would wander out across the prairies and drag home all kinds of bits of meat or whatever. And it took off. Didn't come home one night. It was just cold. We figured the dog had frozen to death. Didn't show up the next day. Finally just came barely making it back to the house. And lay down under the stove and went to sleep. That wasn't the one. There was another one like that before when we had a cat. And the poor dog was petrified of the cat. The cat would get up on a couch. And the dog was so gentle, and the cat would whack at the dog's head. And the dog would whine around because of this cat. But that was what happened. On one of those cold nights, it got so cold that we woke up in the morning. And we came down the kitchen under the coal stove in the morning where the fires banked all night. And the dog was curled up, and inside the curl up of the dog, the kitten and the cat was just lying there, just as warm and comfortable as could be. And from then on, they were fast friends. No more fights after that.
Yeah.
It was so darn cold that cat found the warmest place it could.
Dog didn't mind a bit.
Oh no, dog had never minded at all. But a cat is a heat sink.
Yeah.
It will take all the heat from the house. Someday there will be no heat left in the world.
After all, cats.
Cats will have it all.
Sure.
So it will not just evolve from some kind of a physics formula or theory.
Cat and the dip.
The heat will actually not dissipate. It will, in the end, go into all the world's cats.
Be absorbed.
You ought to turn that off. There you go.
One time I was talking to Mother, and it was regarding, I don't know, clothes on a line or papers or something that were blowing around in the wind. And
Where were we?
I don't know, it doesn't matter. I said,
Were we in Montana?
not at the time, no. This was much later, probably in Seattle, and I was just recalling.
Oh, okay.
And I said, wow, that really would have flapped in Montana. And she said,
No.
on the High Line. She said, no, nothing flapped. Everything was wired to the ground, because anything that would flap had blown away.
Really?
And that's all that there is to that
I mean,
story.
just hanging up clothes on the line?
Well, I don't know. They must have.
The wind was so
but
strong.
Well, the thing is, clothes on the line would, you left them out until they got dry and then took them in.
Yeah.
But if they'd been out there very long, a couple of days, for instance, they would have blown away, pulled right out of the clothespins, and
Or they shredded themselves.
then wound up in Texas or someplace.
Well, I can remember your mother telling about hanging the clothes out and having them freeze solid,
Oh, yes.
and then bring them in and stand up the long underwear against the wall.
Until it thawed out. Oh, gee, there was all this stuff drying in every conceivable place. Racks over the stove, racks in the corner of the room. Ilsa still hangs out her clothes when she can, but I do not. I put them in the dryer.
I hang mine out in the summer.
Uh-huh. Well,
I like the way the sheets smell.
oh yes, it is wonderful. It is wonderful, but I use the dryer most of the time.
Must be a stop button here somewhere. Does it say stop somewhere? Well, I guess I was thinking, eventually I guess I'll probably die anyway, but not right now. Right now I'm beating the cancer, and I think I'm winning this round. But just in general, I was thinking about writing a letter to each of the boys. Thinking about what a wonderful experience it's been, what a wonderful life, and just kind of reiterating it. And I started doing it internally, mentally, and I'm thinking, okay, I write the first letter, and the first letter is going to say, boy, I am so incredibly proud of everything you have ever done, including the wacky, zany things that show that kind of wonderful independence that we love and creativity, and things maybe seem to go a wrong way, but all I could come up with was, on the first letter, to whoever it was, couldn't decide who for, was, I am so incredibly proud of everything you have ever done. And then I'm thinking about the next letter. I'm thinking, my God, it's the same thing. Every letter would say essentially the same thing, and all I can do is kick back sometimes and just remember, God, 1,000 little things that would never fit in any letter you could ever write. Been one hell of a ride, and just incredibly proud of every single one of you, from day one to the present and into the future. It's pretty good legacy if I kick the bucket, but not yet. I'm sticking around. I want to see some more. Wow. That's the blind luck of having married the right woman and passed on some decent genetics, and God, maybe there was some blind luck in the way we did things in there, but I think we had a hell of a time. I think we still do, and boy, oh boy. You guys are just absolutely terrific. What more can I say? I don't know. I suppose I should write it down, but dang, it would take forever. Just before that, Barbara and my sister Barbara, Luana and I were sitting at the table here having lunch, a bowl of soup. I'm not tell when it is right now. It's Thursday, October 28th, 1999, and it was around noon. It's getting on to 3 now. Anyway, my family and I've talked a little bit about my brother Edgar, and when he was born, and not much beyond that. I really guess I need to get into that sometime a little bit, seeing what that our family was. He was born when I was 8, and it was 1937, and he was a little different than the rest of us in some ways. He was always heavier. Not like really fat, but heavy. And he didn't talk very early. I don't think he actually really talked until he was 5 years old. He might have been a lot younger than that. He was only a baby, though, and one year we were sitting around the Christmas tree. It must have been his first year, I suppose. Second. Born in May, and Christmas, it might have been the first Christmas. It was night, and there were lights in the tree, and we're all just sitting there quietly. And whichever year it was, he'd never said any words, and he was fascinated by a light bulb on the tree, and he was looking at it. It was rather close to him. He pointed at it, and he said, "Ite, ite," and that was his first word. And interesting, it was right. It was somewhat predictive, a little prophecy there, because as he got bigger and before he talked or anything like that, and on through the rest of his short life, he was fascinated by mechanical and electrical things. And sometimes it seemed that he was the kind of a person who related more to those than he did to people. And I thought oftentimes his reactions to people were a little unusual, not bad. He got along with people okay, but today, he'd be on top of the world. He'd be a nerd, yeah. And he was a nerd at his time, in some ways. Not a terrible nerd, but he was. And in that was his direction of his interest. But, of course, a little child, a little different than when you get into be the tech guy in junior high and high school, and run all the lights for all the plays and run the motion picture machines and do all that stuff. You fix the electrical equipment stuff, but then go hobnobbing with older guys that have electrical shops and work away, just like a team in there. I even like to see so much of that today. Now that we've always had those people. Anyway, that was part of his nature, but well, going through all those schools and everything as a little child, Memphis, Tennessee, where they have no idea that a left-handed person, a little child, sometimes writes backwards, or that a person who doesn't choose to, in first grade in Chinook, Montana, color the leaves green like they tell you to, and sometimes colors them red or something. Takes a little flack from people. They didn't understand kind of different little children much in those days, so it made it a little harder too. But and he went on and got through high school, had friends, and my folks saw to it that he had a car because he was responsible and needed it, and didn't have to be much because he fixed whatever it was. And God, when I got back from Korea, he had a big old Oldsmobile, And Korea, well, I couldn't get a Jeep going very fast because the roads were, if any roads were so bad, you know, 25 miles an hour, it bounces you through the ceiling of the Jeep if you have one on it. But, so he was going to take me to, they lived in California, going to take me to Tahoe. We went to Tahoe for a little while. Get in this car with him, a big old Oldsmobile. Now we're on a freeway. Takes off down the freeway and joins the traffic. Hits 80, 85 miles an hour. And I was just absolutely scared to death. I just, prior to seatbelts, I just wanted to sink down onto the floor. I thought we were going to die. Anyway, the way he died was I had been fascinated by underwater swimming from the time I was a little child. And God, here came along Cousteau. So as soon as I get back from Korea in 55, essentially 56 by then, I got myself trained as a scuba diver and did a little bit. And so one day they'd come up here and I took them out to scuba diving. Got the gear on them, stood them about on the edge of the water. I said, okay, I got to get another piece of equipment. Don't go anywhere. Came back. He was gone. I said, where is he? They said he went in the water. It was a crowd. Almost drew a crowd then. So I commandeered a boat immediately and grabbed the anchor. I was going to drop down, 20 feet or so and grab wherever the bubbles came up. By the time I commandeered a boat, which wasn't long, got there, why they were through coming up, I couldn't get them. And, I was, of course, just devastated. But people read forced me to listen to the newspaper accounts on the front page of Times, I suppose, and PI. The people standing around watching said that I had told them to stay there and not move, not go in the water. Everybody said the same thing. They didn't know why he had done it. Of course, I felt guilty. I felt like I'd killed him for years and years and years. It was stupid. Just a guilt trip that people have. But they even went and interviewed the place where I'd trained to be a scuba diver, and they said I'd been, a really competent graduate, and I knew what I was doing, and I just did all the right things. And so, finally, in the last couple of years only, I think I realized that it was his fault, not mine. Why in the heck he ever did it, I cannot ever possibly imagine what went wrong there. But the witnesses were 100%. Didn't help me, though. I drifted away from the water for years after that and started going into the mountains. It was a long, long time before I ever went back to the water again. And of course, I've still lost my interest in scuba diving, but that's okay. I don't mind that. Well, I guess I better keep going on these things. Seems like we got out of Chinook, Montana last time I heard. I hope so. I never could think of anything much to say about Chinook. It was a good place. I guess went to freshman year in high school there. But, my dad moved on. Well, we were, my mother and brother and Barbara and I were living in a duplex in Chinook, Montana, because that was the home of my mother, hometown. And anyway, wherever my dad had been in the Army Air Corps for the past year, while they sent him to a desert strip down in Palm Springs. Palm Springs is a little different than it is now. It was a resort place already, but of course I haven't been there in years since. But it was a pretty small time, I guess, by comparison then. So we lived in a little house like a lot of people, and yards were desert sand. And try to water the whole thing and turn the place green. My dad came and picked us up in an Army staff car up above, it was one of the towns up above Palm Springs, Coachella or something, I can't remember. Anyway, we got in this car, having ridden on the train standing up part of the time, because in those war years, you could hardly get a seat in a train, and we were pretty tired and everything, but had a dog in a crate, got the dog, and got in this Army staff car, and discovered that you drop way the heck down into the desert floor, and as you drop down, it was, I suppose, I'd driven a tractor on a farm for about a month, I think, or something like that, before we left Chinook, so it must have been July by then. And dropping down into the desert floor there, and it got hotter and hotter and hotter. It was well over 100 degrees when we got down there, something new to us. But kind of liked it. Funny, the war years were so horrendous to so many people, but to us, it was an incredible, wonderful step out of the kind of the mid-range of the Depression. We never were at the bottom of it because we always had a place and food. But here we find ourselves in this place, and we go to this house, and I don't know how soon, but I wouldn't doubt right away we probably went out to the officers' mess, and where other people were suffering with all kinds of rationing and couldn't get sugar or coffee or God knows beef or whatever. We could get anything we wanted, and people waited on us. There were German prisoners and stuff, and we never seen anything like it in our lives. So Palm Springs had it was a wonderful thing for us. About 6 months. For a job, I find myself sometimes I was working in these resort hotels, and instead of driving a tractor around a field somewhere, I find myself maybe sitting 30 feet up and whacking the beard off a palm tree with a big knife. Or I'd be working as in a resort hotel dining room in some capacity. Yeah, it was a real nice change of pace, but one of the things was that if you just went up the road a little place from my house, you came to the mountain, and Mount San Jacinto rose straight up off the desert. They said it was the highest direct rise from floor to ceiling of any mountain on earth. And so in this hot summer desert, the sun had set 4:30 in the afternoon and cast this wonderful shadow over the town, and it was cool. But one of the things I like to do was walk down the road. God, it couldn't have been more than 3/4 of a mile max, I'd think, maybe a half mile. Enter this great big canyon. Barbara and I go down there in Taquit's Canyon. Have I told you? Anyway, we'd walk in there, and on a hot summer desert day, and you'd step inside this canyon, and it was again suddenly cool. There were palm trees in there. It was quite a big open place right into the base of the mountain, it seemed. And in those days, there were no big resorts up on top of San Jacinto with ski resorts and restaurants and toilets and all that stuff, and a lift. Just an empty, barren place up there, and I suppose there was snow in the winter, I don't know. Anyway, the water would come cascading down into this canyon, and there were great big rounded rocks, gosh, big ones. You'd climb up on top of those, you could dive if you wanted to down into just these wonderful, deep, swirling, clear pools. You could drink the water and hike around the canyon there all day. It's funny, unless we went there with friends, which we did occasionally, nobody else ever seemed to bother to go there. It's hard to understand, but it was just a beautiful place. One of many. One time, probably pretty early on, Edgar and Barbara and myself and my mother started walking down that direction from the house for some reason. I don't know why, where we're going. Probably just going for a walk, and it was a place that didn't seem to amount to much. But it said date milkshakes, and for some reason we had some change, and my mother bought us all these date milkshakes. And that was a new experience. We weren't used to any milkshakes. And things were just wonderful. The desert was a great place. I grew dates down there because the climate was right, hot and dry. So those are a couple of things. But in the fall, we went to school for a semester. The school welcomed us. It was certainly a different place itself. It didn't have any dark interior hallways. Everything was outside except the classroom itself. The lockers were outside. The volleyball field was outside. Everything was outside. And it didn't rain. One time it rained, everybody ran out just to get in the rain, met the neighbors. But, yeah, in that school, instead of being kind of treated as strange people passing through, there were incredibly wealthy kids, and the very poorest ones from the Mexican desert, or from the kind of Mexican jungle out in the desert there, and all us military kids and others in between, and everybody was amazingly friendly, and it seemed like the classes were nice, the teachers were great, and we had such a wonderful time at Palm Springs Union High School. We were sure lucky there. In 44 by then, and the war effort was a panic pace, and it was our first experience around airplanes, really. I mean, of course, there was everything just going through there. Anything from experimental to bombers, fighter planes. A very, very exciting sort of thing for me, for all of us, really. The whole spirit and attitude of everybody, enlisted men, pilots, everybody was just upbeat, friendly, accepting, fast-moving, happy. As long as you weren't getting shot down by flak in Europe or something in Asia, why, it was a very wonderful and upbeat time. And used to be a kind of a vehicle that ran around being towed by some kind of little tractor that we called the fanny buster, and you could sit down on the benches and ride all around the base, and you could be right on flight line or go to the PX or whatever in the heck, and actually the prices they had there, you could afford a candy bar, a milkshake, a Coke, or whatever occasionally, and it's wonderful hot desert weather, and they had swimming pools, and we of course got to go to the officers' swimming club pool. House club swimming pools, and again, nobody treated us like kids, even though Barbara and I were teenagers, and gosh, it was wonderful to be able to go swimming in that desert climate. And not only the officers club pool, but military had commandeered a little resort hotel out of town, where in the evening you go by and there'd be a sergeant playing wonderful songs on the piano, and you could go out to the pool and swim in the wonderful desert night air. It was like a little dream world to us, like we had just stepped into, like out of the looking glass or something. It ended as abruptly as it began, another transfer. So standard military transfer, and from there to Memphis, which was almost at first, as far as school and stuff was concerned, was a 100% reversal. Just an awful drab brick building with hundreds of kids inside. Nobody knew anybody or cared one way or the other. You just went through it. But it ended, and some good stuff happened in the summer in Memphis, Tennessee. Actually, some good stuff happened before then. One of the things was you didn't ride school buses, you'd ride a city bus on the way home from school somewhere. You might stop and go down to the farmer's marketplace there where you change buses in the middle of Memphis, and there's a donut machine there. And you watch it make these kind of complicated different donuts that come popping around. We've never seen it like that before. Every once in a while, I get down there and get a cup of coffee and a donut on the way home. Wonderful thing. And then there was my friend J.W. Gresham next door. J.W.? J.T. or something like that. And we had our old balloon-tired one-speed bikes. And J.T. and I, in that wintertime that we lived in Memphis, there was a neighbor, would hop on our bikes and we'd just grab a hold of the back of a truck or a bus or something and ride all over Memphis. Pretty high speed, right in the traffic, whatever traffic, pretty good traffic there then. And goof around the town somewhat like that. That was one of the things that happened anyway. But when school ended, I fell into the lap of luxury. Harp did pretty well too. 16-year-old boy, there was a job on the air base that everybody wanted, but only I could get it because I had a connection. My dad knew somebody, and there were 3 of us. They called us messengers for aircraft engineers, and they gave us each a Jeep and put a pennant on the front of it, flying a yellow and red flag on the front of our Jeep. And we're the only ones that could drive out on the flight line, out across the taxi strips and runways and out on the tarmac and all that stuff, and deliver messages and occasionally give rides to pilots and stuff like that, just for the heck of it. But nobody seemed to care much even how we drove. We just had a lot of fun zapping around in these Jeeps. And they paid us for it. And could never imagine having a job like that for a 16-year-old kid at the time. But